Welcome to Strategy Speaks, the official podcast of the Center for Security, Diplomacy and Strategy at the Vrije Universiteit, Brussels. I'm your host, Daniel Fiott, and for this fifth episode, I'm delighted to welcome Professor Dr. Antonio Calcara for a discussion about geopolitics and technology. Antonio is a very good colleague. He's a professor at the VUB, and he also heads at CSDS, the Program for Geopolitics and Technology. I should also note at the very beginning that he is also currently leading a European Research Council project entitled Competition in the Digital Era, Geopolitics and Technology in the 21st Century, or the CODE project, to give it its shorter title. And in this session, we'll be getting into a discussion about the nature of geopolitics and technology, and we'll also be learning a bit about Antonio's project along the way. I'll be asking Antonio a little bit about how he sees the future trends unfolding in the interplay between geopolitics and technology. A big and warm welcome to this fifth episode, Antonio.
Hi, Daniel. Thanks for having me.
To begin this episode and our discussion together, I wonder if you can give our audience a little bit of a background to the CODE project that I mentioned, and also in what it really entails. More specifically, perhaps, what we'd like to learn is a little bit about your research plans and why you also think that your project is particularly timely and necessary.
Hi, Daniel. Yes, thanks a lot. So CODE stands for Competition in the Digital Era. So as you said, so the project is funded by a grant from the European Research Council for 5 years. It started in January 2024 and it will end in 2029. The project aims to explore the links between technology and geopolitics, in particular, focusing on the current geopolitical and technological competition between China and the United States and its implications for Europe. The project focused specifically on 3 technological sectors: semiconductors, cloud computing, and space. So much in the news these days, semiconductors are the backbone of the current digital age, and they are really essential for any digital product. So the value chain of semiconductors is extremely complex and globalized, with firms from all over the world specializing in specific and complex tasks, such as the design of semiconductors, mainly based in the United States, the manufacturing of semiconductors, mainly in Taiwan and in South Korea, and the assembling and packaging of chips, mainly based in China, but also in the supply of specialized machines and products in which also European firms are protagonists. Cloud computing is another very interesting sector. Cloud is used to store and analyze vast amount of data and is really fundamental to the development of artificial intelligence. There is no OpenAI, there is no ChatGPT or any AI language model service without the data center and the physical infrastructure that surround the cloud computing. The cloud computing market is also very interesting because it's built around big tech that are really able to control the entire infrastructure, from software to the data centers. The third area is the space sector, which basically includes the entire R&D, manufacture, and application of space-related products, and it's fundamental for economic growth and also for military power. Just think about the role of satellites for communication in financial services, but also on the battlefield. The space sector was traditionally dominated by state agencies, but right now private actors and entrepreneurs are massively investing in these sectors, as well changing the market and the innovation dynamics. So the project wants to start from the characteristics of these 3 important sectors, but then analyze the policies and the instruments that China, the United States, and Europe are using in order to access and control these technologies, and the economic and the political links between them. So the objectives of the project are essentially 3. So from a scientific point of view, this is one of the first projects to analyze technological competition, both from a technical and a political point of view, focusing on the intersection between the 2 aspects. I'm really convinced that it's essential to understand in detail how the technological sectors operate in order to assess their geopolitical implication. Currently, research in international relations tend to mainly focus on the political aspects of this competition, but tech and innovation dynamics play a role in shaping political dynamics. So I think that there is a dialectic relationship between technical and political dynamics, and the project was to stand at the intersection between the two. So the ambition of the project is also to attract and develop a multidisciplinary research team that can communicate to different audiences, from software engineers to political scientists. The second objective of the project is to try to measure technological competition through a mixed method approach, using both qualitative methods, interviews, elite surveys, but also quantitative methods related to the analysis of data on patents and market indicators. An important aspect of the project is to measure the diffusion of technological capabilities from one country to another, but also from one firm to another, using the tools of network analysis and machine learning. So the project really aims to advance the state of the art in investigating in a more granular way the technological competition. Finally, the aim of the project is to disseminate the research results to a wider audience than the scientific community. This is also one of the reasons that lies behind the Geopolitics and Technology program that you mentioned, Daniel, at the Center for Security Diplomacy and Strategy that I lead, which aims to become an infrastructure that attracts a multidisciplinary team willing to do research on these topics, but also to disseminate the results of the research through long and detailed analysis, academic articles, but also policy briefs that are accessible to a wider audience. And the program is also organizing many events in Brussels to bring our researchers into dialogue with institutions, industry, students, and civil society more broadly.
Thanks, Antonio, for that excellent overview of the Code project. And yes, being one of your colleagues at CSDS, in fact, I can already confirm, having been to some of your activities, that it is very much the direction in which you want to go for this very interesting project. And as you said, extremely timely, I think, not just from an intellectual point of view, but also from a policy point of view, especially given the new leaderships that will be coming in to power both at the EU and also at the NATO levels. Now, what you said in your response also kind of touches upon a second question that I had in mind. And I wanted, if possible, to invite you to dig a little bit deeper into some of the major structure dynamics at play as you see them. Behind this so-called Geo-Tech perspective on, geopolitics, technology, and the interrelation between the two, how do you see that unfolding in the context of strategic competition between the United States and also China, which you indeed have also touched upon? So for this second question, I guess, could you please unpack a little bit the strategic rationale as you see it?
Yes, so technology is certainly one of the privileged arenas in which the broader strategic competition between China and the United States is being played out. Also because we are living through an historical phase that is characterized by a very rapid technological change, characterized first and foremost by ever-increasing computing power, and thus a greater capacity to process and analyze huge amount of data, which is basically what lies behind the development in artificial intelligence. So technology is therefore an important aspect of this geopolitical competition between Beijing and Washington. On the one hand, Xi Jinping China has focused on innovation, technological innovation, as one of the cornerstones of Chinese growth. First, to very structured plans to attract investments and partnerships with Western companies and research centers, and now with a more indigenous development that is trying to reposition China in very innovative technological sectors. Just think about all the infrastructures that is related with green technologies, right? So the United States, for its part, is trying to maintain the technological supremacy it achieved in the computer revolution through a policy of export control and investment screening designed to assess more carefully the risk that technology transfer might strengthen or reinforce its strategic rival, but also through massive industrial policy plans to revive US technological and industrial competitiveness in sector where Either there has been excessive dependence on foreign markets. For instance, that's the case of semiconductor. This is one of the rationale of the US Chips and Science Act, or in sectors where the US administration felt that there was insufficient investment. And this is, for instance, the case of the green technologies. And this is the rationale for the creation of the Inflation Reduction Act. To be sure, the technological and strategic competition between China and the United States has implications for many regional contexts, such as, for instance, Taiwan or the Asia-Pacific region, but also for Europe. Many public reports indicate, they tend to suggest that Europe is generally lagging behind Beijing or Washington in the technology race. And it is certainly true that Europe has problems in positioning itself in new technological sectors. This is due to the inability of the European companies to scale up, the high cost of energy that makes very difficult to attract investments from big tech, and the lack of investment, public and private investment in new technologies in the still very fragmented European capital market. So for instance, according to a recent report of the European Investment Bank, only the 5% of global venture capital funds are raised in the European Union, compared with 52 in the United States and over 40% in China. It has to be said, however, that Europe retains important technological niche. We are not starting from scratch here. We have some important players in the semiconductors value chain, in the software market, in the 5G and 6G market, and we have also very innovative startups in the generative AI field. It needs to be said that much has been done in recent years to try to change direction, both by trying to be more strategic in our interactions with the partners and rivals. And I think the European economic security strategy is an evidence of this, but also by launching pan-European industrial projects in key sectors. Semiconductors and cloud computing are two prime examples of that, but also clean energy and electric batteries in order to try to reinforce our automotive industry that was always really important for the European market. So the competition between the United States and China is really forcing Europe to make important choices. I think it's in the European interest to try to maintain the openness of international market that has been the strength of the European single market, but Europe needs to be able to defend its own interests when they are threatened by foreign rivals. It is also clear that the technological field is not a silo. Okay, it's also linked with the economic relations between Europe and the United States, and between Europe and China, which are in a transitional phase as well for very different reasons. But I think it's time that Europe needs to scale up its ambition and need to do it now, and this needs to be a strategic priorities for the incoming European leadership in the next few years.
Thanks, Antonio, for that comprehensive answer, and also for placing Europe's position within this broader geopolitical and technological strategic competition between the US and China. I found that extremely interesting, and also, of course, with a very, very clear policy relevance. I think another dimension here is also the uptake in the usage of the language of both geopolitics and technology. And in particular, I think actors like the European Commission are giving much greater focus to, economic security, and also the geopolitics word as well. So I guess there is also a challenge about how we frame and understand strategic competition in technology and geopolitics, also from a policy dimension. And that really leads me on to the third point that I want to raise here, which is also about how you see the interplay between geopolitics and technology influencing the policy world. And there, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about how you see actors like the EU and NATO also engaging in this discussion about geopolitics and technology. And also, I wonder if you could reflect a little bit on what you think are the most important dimensions of this discussion for the new incoming leadership in both organizations.
Thanks, Daniel. That's a very difficult question to answer, but I think you're certainly right. So the words geopolitics and technology are certainly overused in the political lexicon at the moment, and they are often used together, right? The risk is that the boundaries between the two will become increasingly blurred, that every technological aspect will become immediately a geopolitical aspect and vice versa, right? Instead, we must remember that the current process of technological innovation in the digital era, for instance, in the field of software and artificial intelligence, is based on open and global innovation, in which there is a constant interaction between large companies, small startups, open source groups, and users that are based in different parts of the world. So we must therefore try to maintain the right balance between the need to safeguard the strategic interests of the states, but also the economic and financial, and I will add also cultural openness that has driven technological innovation so far. And I think that's the first message that I would like to send to the upcoming leadership. I think in this context, both NATO and the EU are really at a critical juncture in ensuring this right balance between focusing on geopolitical and geostrategic elements and providing the right incentives for companies and individuals to develop a culture of innovation. For instance, both organizations have identified a number of technological sectors in which they want to invest in order to maintain a technological age, for instance, in the case of NATO, and to grow and be competitive in the case of the EU. Concrete and important initiatives have been linked to these roadmaps. In the case of NATO, I would like to mention the Diana and the NATO Innovation Funds. In the case of the EU, I would like to mention the European Chips Act, the European Industrial Green Deal, the European Defence Fund, and all the different projects of common European interest that are being developed now. I would say that the time for thinking about the technologies to be supported and the infrastructure to support them is over. Now is the time to make them really work. And that requires strong political will, first, and a significant financial incentive. In the case of the EU, trying to devote a substantial part of the budget to the development of pan-European projects and insisting in the public procurement of the development of critical technologies will be crucial to translate words into facts when it comes to technological innovation. So let's hope that the leadership of the two organizations have both the political and the financial ambitions to do so. Daniel, a final point, there are two issues that I believe deserve further reflection within Europe and NATO. First is the access to critical raw materials. This is really important for all the developments in artificial intelligence and in software, because everything starts with critical raw materials, and this requires very carefully diplomacy and partnership with allies and like-minded countries. Second factor, talent, human skills. So NATO and Europe must invest heavily in the development and training of highly skilled human capital. So in what it is often called as the machine age, I think people will still make the difference.
Thank you very much for that, Antonio, and also for unpacking those two very important issues. I think more finances, more money, and also the political will. I think it's also very clear from you in your responses that yes, even indeed over the last few years, that we've seen a greater awareness of the relationship between geopolitics and technology. And even though a lot of actors can be accused of using them as sort of buzzwords without much substance behind these expressions, I think what you've said is that in the next few years there will be a much greater need to grapple with the intricacies of how geopolitics and technology come together. And I think indeed your project fills a very interesting and important void in this cause. So thanks so much, Antonio, for joining me for this fifth episode of Strategy Speaks. I think it's been very illuminating. I wish you a lot of luck with your project, and also look forward to the research findings from your work. The conversation will, of course, continue, and I look forward to the next episode of Strategy Speaks. But for now, thank you for joining us, Antonio.